You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Berges.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Berges. Tonight I want to talk about music. I want to talk about acoustics. I want to talk about stereo. I want to talk about all kinds of different things. And I thought about the proper person to bring into this show is a good friend. And I met him actually on a radio show. I think it was about a year ago, and I'll have to see that. I'll have to see if Bob agrees with me on that year. But Bob Suffolk joins us here on Live Your True Life Perspectives to talk about music and studios and all these things that I like to talk about. Bob, I'm so glad you joined us here live. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you again, Ashley.
It's good to see you, too. Yeah. When do you think we met?
I think it was at the Sonic Assembly. It's probably about nearly 7 or 8 months ago.
I was close.
Yeah, you were close.
I was close. Yeah. So tell our listeners a little bit about what you do, because I think we had a 2-hour conversation after the show.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that show ended at 2 a.m. or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, and I was still in the conversation. So tell our listeners what it is that you do.
I design recording studios and theaters, acoustics. I do the interior design. I don't really deal with the electronic side of it, although I deal with the people dealing with the recording equipment. But I mainly do the interior, make the room sound exactly how it should, and follow through with furniture and fittings, studio furniture and fittings to get the equipment fitted correctly. You know.
That sounds really great. I mean, I have to deal with that. I have the necessary need for that, being in the industry that I'm in, because honestly, everybody listening, I'm telling you one thing: if the acoustics are wrong, all you hear is the wrong stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be very. It's a make or break, with the recording industry and radio as well. You have to have the right acoustics. Even with clubs, I've done a few. I did B.B. King's Club many years ago, and the acoustics in there were dreadful, and the stage was boomy, and they brought me in, and we altered it. And not that you really doesn't take very much to pack in a B.B. King club with B.B. King, but the sound was just dreadful in there. And
was it really?
Oh yeah, but we fixed it up for him.
That's pretty interesting. So I bet you've met some neat people throughout your lifetime. Tell me some of those folks that you really loved and enjoy working with.
Well, I started in the music industry, if I want to go back a bit, when I was...
Yes, I want to start at the beginning.
When I was 17, I was an apprentice for a couple of things in the East End of London. And then I moved into the recording industry as a tape-op, or actually T-boy, before we had remote controls on tape machines, and eventually I went through a bunch of work for a lot of very well-known recording studios, and then I was in a band at the time, like most people were in the recording studio industry, and I left that to play professionally for a long time, and then in '82 I started designing recording studios. My dad was an architect and an inventor, and my mum was a musician, so it kind of almost came natural. And I'd been in so many studios all my life, so I don't know, it just kind of happened. And some of the people I've met lots of really great people. Paul McCartney, lovely man. Just, oh my gosh, there's so many... I'm trying to think of now, flashing back 30 odd years. Ella Fitzgerald, she was lovely. I finished the original Beatles recording studio, and she was one of the first artists to come back in to the original Trident recording studios, and that was a thrill. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people over the years, and working with a lot of famous people, and a lot of people very talented, like Leon Bridges. I did the Leon Bridges studio in Fort Worth before he had the hit, and we worked through it, and I just finished that about 6-7 months ago. We finished that, and he's about to do a new album now in that. So, and he's a lovely fella.
See, that's neat. You get to be around all that. You were in all that. I mean, what were some of the gigs that you played that you really enjoyed?
As a musician, the famous Marquee Club in England, the Vondel Park in Holland, many clubs, the Milky Way Club in Amsterdam. Oh gosh, tons and tons of places I can't even remember. I was in the van playing from one gig to another, But and then I did a lot of session work in those days before I was, and a lot of voiceover work before I got into designing recording studios.
I think it's interesting. I think one of the biggest dreams that I think most men have had, most boys to men have had, is to play in a band. Oh
yeah, it's pretty awesome. When you get to a certain point, it's hard work. It's a lot of the kids today. I tell them where they come into the studio and they're new musicians that you have to do it for the art of music, not for the fame and the money. That will come if it comes, But be true to yourself with your music and your art more than anything. A lot of kids just want to be famous and have lots of money, and they don't really work on their talent,
What kind of advice? I know there's some folks out there that, have been playing for a long period of time. I actually have a couple of friends. One of my friends has been playing since he was, playing with a band since he was about 15. He's about 45. He's played in about 16 bands.
Wow.
Seattle, LA, all over. What kind of advice would you give someone that's gotten really close, and questioning, their situation?
Oh, gosh. It's who you deal with: managers, promoters, agencies, record labels, but the main thing is having chemistry within the band. If you've got a really good musical chemistry within the band, and you're really good, and you just keep gigging, someone's going to pick you up at some point. But it's such a tangled web in the music business these days. It was a lot easier in the 80s and the 90s. It was, but these days I wouldn't want to be a young musician. It's a hard game.
It really is.
It really is. I mean, Leon got picked up, and his rise to fame was absolutely magical, and you don't see that too often. But a lot of kids in bands and people in bands, you can get in with some of the wrong people in the music industry. You can get in with the right people. It just depends on who you're dealing with.
I agree with you about the cohesion of a band, and I think that's often overlooked by folks, is there's a lot of egos.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. A lot of egos, and you have to kind of keep it down, and that's why you got to understand your band members and just concentrate on the music. There can be a lot of fighting. I've known a lot of professional bands who I will not mention any names, who have had some horrendous run-ins with each other.
I bet. And
broken up and everything. But you got to look at it as a business. You're selling product, and you're entertaining, and you're selling product, and the record label really, they kind of care, but they really just want to sell product. So you have to get used to being, doing what the record label tells you before you get a hit. And then when you get a hit, then you can start commanding. Too many people get record contracts, and then they start to want to do their own thing, and the record label just says, "No, you just try our way. We're putting the money into you, and if that doesn't work, we'll try your way."
Oh yeah, you got to prove it.
Yeah, you got to kind of prove it to them, and you got to kind of eat a little humble pie before you can start
barking orders at
the record labels.
I remember one of the famous bands is Fleetwood Mac. To me, is a famous band that had awesome music and awesome hits at the same time, falling apart at the seams. And I recently saw them play recently, I guess it was about 6 to 12 months ago or something, and it was a great concert. I mean, it was great, but it's like if everybody could just put their issues aside and stop, in the previous years, back in the day, stop dating inside the band, we might be okay. And I'm not throwing stones, I'm just saying that was across the board with a lot of bands, and it's like, can you go outside of the band, and can we create a cohesion, a family for that matter.
Well, they started recording, and they were totally unknown. It was only because they worked with the right people. They recorded in some very famous recording studios in California, and the right people got to hear them, and they started working. They were just a regular band, just like everyone else. You know, I grew up with in England, knowing David Bowie very well. He lived in Beckenham, and from the very first instance, you knew his talent. You know, we used to watch him down at a pub in Beckenham in Kent at the 3 Tons, and I actually have a picture of myself and David in a book that's just come out about David Bowie and at the 3 Tons, and I'm sitting in the corner, and he's you could see that his rise to fame was going to happen at some point, and you can kind of. He knew how to control the record labels, and he knew how to control studios, and he knew how to control fellow musicians. He always worked well with musicians. Yeah.
Bob, when we return, I want to talk more about you and David Bowie and more about his background too, because I think you can offer some insight that a lot of us have no idea on. So stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Berges, be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Berges. Tonight, a good friend of mine joins me, Bob Suffolk. Bob is, let's just say he has a lot of knowledge. He has a lot of good friends, and he knows what to do when it comes to music, dealing with musicians, and also making some of the most amazing studios known to man. Bob, right before the break, we were talking about you and David Bowie. Tell us some more, because I think David Bowie is one of a lot of people's favorites out there.
Well, I lived in Beckenham, and David Bowie lived in Beckenham. He lived at a place called Haddon Hall, and we were in a small society called the Beckenham Arts Lab, where it had Julie Driscoll, Brian Auger, Arthur Brown, and David Bowie. And we used to do these, what they would call like free concerts. And we kind of grew. I was just toying with some new bands at the time, and I worked with some members of a theatre, and then we met Lindsay Kemp, who is a mime artist, very famous mime artist, and then we introduced him to David, and then David started getting into the glam rock type of thing, and David was always 10 steps ahead of everyone, and just when you thought you were going to follow in some of his steps, he's another 10 steps ahead, because the thing that he was doing had finished. He was very, very smart. I played with a lot of people then, and we knew some people in Hull, and we introduced them to David. Some friends of mine did introduce this band from Hull in up north of England, and David started working with the Spiders, and that's a band called the Spiders. It's very musicians. It's very incestuous musicians. They're all playing in other people's bands, and until they get it right, But David was a lovely character and a smashing guy, and he always was a consistent personality. That's the one thing that we all really enjoyed about David, and everyone should have consistent personalities. You'll get on much better in business and the music if you're consistently a nice person or a decent person.
I like that, Bob, and let's talk about that right now, consistent personalities. I think a lot of folks listening to radio tonight, listening to the show tonight, you might not know David Bowie personally or didn't, but the one thing you can say is that you have met people that have consistent personalities, and you've met people that you don't know if it's really them by their actions.
Absolutely true, yeah.
I met somebody, this will be interesting, about a year ago, I remember I ran into somebody, you know those people that they never say hi.
Yeah.
You know those.
Yeah.
Like they're never the first one to say hi, and you're like, hey, and they'll hi, hey Bob, what's going on? Or they'll be like, oh hey, and I ran into one of those one time, and I finally decided to turn the tables around. I didn't say hi, and I just kept walking. They literally followed me around for 10 minutes, and finally like, hey Ashley, why are you, hey, what's going on? How you doing? But it was funny because people have these interesting personalities. Like, I'm the first one to wave or say hi, even if it's not the best of days, even if I'm not in the happiest of mood, even if hormones are just really messed up, I'll sit there and say, how you doing? But I found that a lot of people aren't similar nature across the board. But I also find, honestly, that now in these days and times, a lot of people are on a lot of medication and a lot of people are self-medicating. And so you don't really know who you're getting until you say hi.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people's personalities, they can be either a little coarse or a little rough, but they're dealing with their own issues as well, and it's up to an individual, I believe, to be able to control your personality and to be able to say, I know I can be a little this and a little that, but I'm in a meeting or I'm with a friend, and you've got to kind of really learn some social graces. And I think once you learn some social graces,
I love that, social graces,
then I think you can become more consistent. And I agree with you. A lot of people are on medication, and you kind of have to sometimes put that aside and go, I understand that person is slightly bipolar or whatever. I think it's more of understanding what the person is. And then, but in the music business, going back to that, you really should be consistent because you're dealing with a lot of inconsistent people. And if you can have a controlled and consistent personality, you're going to get through it. All those other people are just going to fall by the wayside because people are just not going to want to deal with them in the end,
And that's really similar when when we're talking about management, or we're talking about whoever in the education system, whatever you're doing. And I find that oftentimes when you have someone that's honest and consistent, authentic, it really is appealing because, it gets lost in the shuffle sometimes, because I think that things are coming at us at such a rapid rate. We have things and information, social media, news, media, both fear-based and normal-based media. And then you have like this whole interaction of folks, and there's a lot of things going on at one time. And, you often hear the theme. I call this the last 20 years theme is the theme of being busy. We're all so overly busy. And so it's like in order to really connect with somebody, you have to really have that authentic connection. And I think, once you meet somebody for 2 or 3 times and they're not consistent those times, it's almost like you're like, well, hell, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, I care about them. I wish them the best of luck, but I don't have time for that in my life.
Exactly, yeah. You have to kind of choose your wars, really, in something like that. When you're in business, you need to have a business personality that is attached to your own personality, and you need to be true to your craft and what you do. Like a therapist or an announcer or a TV actor or the film actor, directors. Everybody's got to communicate with everybody, and it's nice to go back to a person and know that the conversation you had 2, 3, 4 months before is going to be the same type of consistency that you're going to have on the next conversation, rather than them being completely weirded out on you. And if they are, then you're like, recently, not mentioning any names, I met somebody and I was asked to go and meet these people, and the owner of this particular facility wouldn't even look at me in the eye, and I was trying to help him with acoustics, and he wouldn't even look at me in the eye and just almost boo-hooed me. And I was just like, well, so I, rather than go forward with it, I went backwards and said, I don't think I can work with this particular personality. It's just not going to work. It will be a fool's errand to get involved in a 6-10 month. So you got to kind of look after yourself, I think, with that. Let
me ask you, I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation. As a therapist, I have, folks come into my office and sit down on the actual real couch. Mm-hmm. And, they find themselves in a situation like perhaps that work situation where there's a possibility to have some work and to have financial opportunity. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's at a crossroads with an individual that is very difficult to work with, somebody that might be looking down their nose at you, a sense of entitlement that they have. And I've had people say, well, what do I do? What do I do? And I don't know if you agree with me, but I say, yeah, I mean, money is important to live and to be able to provide.
Course, yeah.
And if that's what you need, first and foremost, and there is no other option, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
However, if that isn't your only option, I mean, you really got to weigh the pros and cons, because you got to go home every night after dealing with this person every single day, and you got to be able to, get away from, because you're gonna feel anger, you're gonna feel you're gonna feel upset, you're gonna feel that energy, and that energy the buck doesn't stop here. And no. I mean, I won't name names as well, but I had a client of mine who used to be the manager for a really big time TV host, and anyway, long story short, they worked together for about 15 years, and they were very good friends, and he ended up getting cancer. The manager did, and he ended up getting out of the industry and everything. And he said, "You know what? I got cancer because that person's personality." And it wasn't. He goes, "I just kept going with it and dealing with it, and it got to me day after day, year after year. But the money was so good that I couldn't turn it down. But I ended up having problems in my marriage. I lost my marriage over it. I almost lost custody of my children over it." He's like, I wouldn't give anything. I mean, now I'm doing this, and I'm happy. I'm not making that money, but I'm so happy that I made this change, and that the cancer treatment worked. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to make that decision.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, going back to the music business, you're dealing with a lot of egos. And when you get a person who is very nice going into the music business, and they get so much attention and so much money and so much yes men around them in the business when they're touring, you've got to keep yourself grounded. And I have seen some good friends lose some marriages and family because of touring. It's a hard life, especially to keep a relationship. And once that starts affecting the person, it's going to affect their craft and their art and their how they react to people in the recording industry and the studio. When you're trying to make a hit record after you've had hit records, you want those personalities to be as they were, not with somebody worried. And usually friends rally around that person, but it's a tough thing. So, and I would say the same in any kind of business. If you're going through a personal crisis, it's going to affect your personality. And what I don't try and take out anything on anyone. If I've got some issues going on, I won't take it out on people. I'll try and put it aside, get through the meeting, and try and be my old self,
Well, that's good. That's good information, because a lot of us, don't know what to do, and I think most of us are the same or try to be that way, but it's hard to kind of keep it leveled. When we return, we're talking more with Bob about studio work, about his designs, about how and what the latest creation he has going on, because I'm interested. So stay tuned. We got some amazing stuff coming up next. Live Your True Life Perspectives. Your host, me, Ashley Berges. Be right back. Be back here in, let me think about it. Okay, yeah. I'll be right back in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Berges.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Berges. Tonight, Bob Suffolk joins me in studio. We're talking about studios. We're talking about the music industry. We're talking about Britain. We're talking about the United States. Bob, okay, I know that you've been awarded some amazing stuff for your build-out of studios, for your designs. Okay, tell us a little bit about what's going on right now.
Well, at the moment, I've just finished, as I just finished the studio for Leon Bridges, who's with Chris Vivian, Josh Block, and Austin Jenkins, who's the musical director. 3 of the most wonderful people you could meet. The chemistry, going back to chemistry, the chemistry that they have between them and Leon is just unbelievable. Just finished that, did that in a vintage style. I mimicked the old Beatles Abbey Road staircase in their studio and gave them a first floor control room, a bit like the old vintage studios with a full view of a very large live room. I've been doing a few little design things. I'm working on an acoustic creation at the moment, which I'm getting a patent on, which I can't really talk very much about, but we're hoping to display that pretty soon. I have 3 studios coming up in a couple of universities and one in San Francisco, I do believe. And I'm just about to start with J.D. McPherson, who has a lot of people would have known, would have heard of him. A lot of people haven't, but if you haven't, listen to him. He's wonderful. I'm designing them a studio in Nashville, and that is based on a vintage look, because they're very 50s rock and roll, but they use strings and cellos, and they're very modern. They're very 2006, but there's a good hint of 50s rock and roll there. So I've created a room for them that is going to be very unique for them. It's as I say, it's in Nashville, and I think they're going to be getting a lot of press from that. They're going to be putting that out very soon on the media. Let me see. I've got some radio studio to do. Secret radio studio coming.
Oh yeah,
up.
I don't know about that. We'll have to keep that under our hat.
And
yeah, Bob's actually going to work with me on my new studio coming up here, so I'm really stoked.
And another one here in Dallas as well.
Ooh. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So there is, and studios normally take 3 or 4 months to design, and once you've had a lot of meetings, so it's a good year to get one from the first meeting to it fully constructed and working. Depending on just things like finance, there's a lot of wheels to turn before you can't just go in and build a recording studio. There's a lot of talking and back and throw and designing and scrapping designs and everything, and talking with electricians and technicians and air conditioning people, all the boring stuff that you have to do before a studio actually looks like a recording studio.
Oh, and mind you, my studio is not one of those studios.
Oh, no,
Mine's like a little box that Bob's gonna make look awesome.
I would hardly say so. We're gonna put correct acoustics in there, and we're gonna make it look great for you.
Do you like how I say that? That was my little box that we're gonna. I mean, and then nobody get any ideas that I'm having a 10,000 square foot studio made. Okay, nothing like that. Nothing like that.
A radio.
One can dream.
One can dream, but a radio control room, it doesn't have to be anywhere as precise and acoustically correct, because when you're mixing music, it has to be it's got to be printed up 1 million times, hopefully, for $1 million selling record. So everything has to be absolutely technically correct. With a radio station, the rooms normally have to be pretty dead, great microphones, nice comfortable seating, nice lighting. So it's not as accurate as a recording studio, but it's still a lot of work.
And as you understand, I think you heard the comfortable seating thing. Bob is in one of these amazing chairs that I actually had custom made, but they are the most uncomfortable chairs known to man. And so I feel bad that he's sitting there. I just put everybody in the hot seat. You know what I mean?
Well, some designers, I was funny today. I was walking this morning and I saw a house that was going up, and it was just a big box. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to put a sign on it that said, was this house designed by the same 3-year-old that designed the Cube car? Because it's just stupid looking. And
I know, right?
As a designer, I just fumble at what some people do. And some chairs and furniture, and I love furniture, and but some chairs can look fabulous. A lot of designers make things look fabulous, but when it comes to actually ergonomically working for a person,
they look good if you look at them.
Yeah,
not necessarily when you sit on
the
them.
chair you're sitting in is the best.
I know, right? I wonder what I took the best chair in the room. I wonder. So so it's interesting though, because I always find studio work so interesting, and I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Because you know how you have people that are really good in a different trade, various trades. A good example to me is a professional photographer. Yeah. You have a professional photographer that can shoot anything, mm-hmm. and everybody on this planet though believes that they're a photographer as well. And so it's funny, like I have a lot of friends that are professionals and we'll sit there and they'll be, oh, I just did Sports Illustrated, or I just did this, or I just shot this thing for Architectural Digest, or whatever it is. And I'm like, oh man, it's awesome. And then I'll always have a friend that comes in and be like, I'm a professional photographer too. And then they're like, oh, geez. And I think it's the same with studios. Everybody thinks they can build a studio by going to Guitar Center. I mean, I built one, at a Guitar Center, but I knew that I'm not a professional studio designer. But don't you find that often in the industry where you have people, I mean, not at your level, but kind of like in a more of an intermediate or a smaller level where you have people thinking they can build all this stuff and they have a good idea, but they're so far from the mark, you know?
Well, thinking that you can build something and actually doing it is two different things. When you, with the way I've always operated it is that if I have a creative idea, I will go and find out how it's done. And if I can't do it, I will get people who I'll be the first person to admit I couldn't do that. I mean, I used to physically build studios years ago. Now I don't. I just kind of point and help out. But the manage and make sure that and I have people around me that are very clever who will just say, what if we did it this way? And I'll go, sure. You've got to be open. But I will go back on some things. I worked in some of the worst studios in the world and created some amazing stuff. So when you're out there as a 16, 18-year-old and you want to put a studio, there's nothing wrong with putting a piece of foam up. You know, my first recording studio had eggshells all over the eggshell cases all over it. But, you know, you recording studios can go from the sublime to the ridiculous, you know, but you can get some good product out there now if you're doing a kind of a semi-professional room. Doesn't have to cost a huge amount of money. The more professional rooms do cost quite a lot, you know. But it really depends on who you're working with, and to be able to not think you can do something. Always ask.
Asking is a good thing. It's like asking directions, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you're stuck. You're like, I don't know where I am, but I'm not going to ask for directions, period. End of story. You're like, well, we could get there if we
You've got to know your limitations. You know, you've got to know what you really can do, not try and think that you can do it, because you're just going to end up in a big mess. You know?
What are some of the most fun things that you've done as far as, you know, reinventing the studio space, or what are some of the most fun things that you've created that you think, you know, really kind of changed the geography of the sound room? I think the main thing that I like to work on is looking at the ergonomic space. When you're looking at making a facility, you've got to take in consideration offices, break rooms, everything else, and then work the studio in and around that space. If you can work the ergonomics in a studio where people can come in, they're very comfortable, there's a green room, there's a lounge, you're going to make the whole environment work. When it comes to a studio, that some of the things I like to do is I like to put some surprises in and do some wacky things where people go, you can't do that, and I go, oh yes I can, you know. Tell me about some of those surprises, because I love those kind of things. I love those. Oh
my gosh, let me try and think. Trying to do. Let me just go back to Nile City Sound Studio. You know, they wanted a first story control room. Quite a feat to do. We had to bring iron girders in and all sorts of things, and I wanted to do this angle wall on the front, and I had architects going, this is not going to happen, that's going to fall, and this is not going to fall, and I would just ignore them and go, that's what I want it to look like, and it won't fall. Understand your physics. And then some people would just be like, oh no, it's going to tip over. But if you understand physics, it won't fall over. And I pushed on that and made it happen. I didn't have to push that far because they liked the design, but a lot of people were very saying this is not going to work. So I like to surprise people and things like that, you know.
I always think it's funny when people tell us it's not going to work. I always think that's funny. Yeah. And when we return, Bob and I are going to be talking more about the studio space, more about music, and kind of what makes him tick and some of the lessons he's learned in life. And we'll be right back. So stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Berges, be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck. Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Berges.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Berges. Joining me in studio this evening, Bob Suffolk. Bob is a good friend of mine. He is a studio builder, creator, extraordinaire, has been in the music industry for a long time.
Forever.
Ever
and ever.
So let me ask you, I mean, from that perspective, I think a lot of people just want to know, what makes you tick?
Oh, gosh. Well, as I said earlier, my dad, I come from a family of painters, artists, as you call them, painters here. Painters in England is people who paint houses, but artists or painters. My grandfather was a painter, and his father was a painter. My dad was a wonderful artist, but he was an electronics inventor. I can't wire a plug personally, but and what inspired me was the fact that my dad would always let me draw consistently from the age of when I could pick up a pencil. Inspiration for me comes from early days of being in recording studios, looking, learning, listening to engineers and producers, listening to why a room sounds wrong, what I thought would make it sound right. And I've made a lot of mistakes, like you have to do. I don't call them mistakes. I think I call them like learning curves, But inspiration, when you look at art, like kinetic art and classic art and modern art, all that sort of stuff will inspire you as a designer. And once you have learnt the craft of drawing and then drafting and then being able to draw your creation and then get wonderful people around you to create something out of a piece of paper or an idea, an inspiration, it will happen. Everything in art and everything around us is done by some guy waking up at 3 a.m. who is inspired about something and sketches it down. I do it all the time. Lots of people, musicians, writers, they'll stay up, they'll write a few chords and try and get a riff, and then all of a sudden they'll get a bridge and put it together, and you've got a great song. So you have to be inspired by life and people and learn from other people. Don't be afraid to learn from other people.
I learned a lesson a long time ago in life, and a friend of mine said, I was very young, you'll always learn something from everybody.
Yeah.
You'll learn how to be or how not to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's interesting, and I figured that out, and I was like, you're right, and it's true. Every single person you meet, and they're not bad people when you learn what you're not going to be or what you don't want to be, but you realize that everybody's going through a growing stage, and everybody's at a different stage in their life. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting, like you were talking about inspiration, I totally agree. I have the 3 a.m. thing for sure, but I like the 3:33 a.m. thing. But anyway, a little precise there. But I also have that thing where if you just relax, like I get some of the most amazing thoughts in the shower.
Yeah.
Or washing my hands. Mm-hmm. Or going to the bathroom, for Christ's sakes. You know what I mean? And you sit there and you go, oh my God, that's it. That is it. And you go write it down and you go, oh my God, I figured it out. And it's amazing when you figure out those things because you say, wow, and you change the course of history to some degree.
Well, you have to mirror off of ideas and mirror off of people, especially with you being a therapist. I mean, you're going to be seeing, we all learn from other people. And once you get into your niche, you can then be driven by the inspiration that you have to do this thing, because none of us are perfect. We've all got our little ways. It's just being able to control those ways, and that works in business, art, music, everything. As long as you know how to control your inspiration, and you know that you're going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and stumble to a drawing pad or a writing pad or a computer blindly and then read it the next day and go, that was complete gibberish, but at least you get it out.
I think I did that yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, seriously, I mean, do you ever write a journal, or do you ever write little ideas to yourself, or?
Yeah, I'll usually on my iPhone now, but I used to have a pad and I would write some ideas or do a quick sketch. Or if I'm at a restaurant somewhere and somebody's talking, I get an idea, I'll write it on a napkin, fold it up, put it in my pocket. You have to do so. You have to take it when it's given to you. It's like a gift. If you're gifted in some way, anyway, and everybody's gifted, you've got to kind of write that down, because there's so many things I dream and I never write down, or I forget. And if you have that, then you just got to find out what's fun and that inspires you and do it. I've been in lots of recording studios that are beautiful by other designers, and I won't copy them, but I go, oh, that's. I like that. I like that fabric. Where's that fabric come from? Or where who makes that? And you just kind of collect all this information. Yeah.
I like that, and I like that. I like the word inspiration. I mean, because it's got spirit in the middle of it. It's kind of like an interesting word. It's almost like earth. It's art. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting. It's got art in the middle of it. It's like when you think about inspiration, it's spirit. So it's at the time that it comes with that energy. You got to write it down. You got to keep up with it, because I find oftentimes when we let it go, when we don't follow through, when we don't take it seriously, it's like it's almost like not taking the cookie. Yeah. The cookie's on the table, and Mom made the cookie by hand, and instead of eating the cookie, you go, I don't want the cookie. You're not going to get another cookie, I'm telling you. The next day, there ain't going to be any cookies, you know what I mean? Because you didn't get the cookie at the time. And I feel that the more you respond to that inspiration, the more often it comes, because it's like anything. When we're grateful for what we get, we seem to get more of it.
Well, you have to listen to that inner voice inside you that's telling you either the truth or not, and you got to believe that inside you to say, I think this is a crazy idea. This is an insane song. My friend from many years back, Kate Bush, who's some people know, some people don't know, she had a song called Wuthering Heights many years ago, and it was tough on her to get a record deal because of her voice. It was different from everyone. And she kept pushing and pushing. We would always say, oh, we'll go see this person. And they rejected her. And then a lot of rejection for those out there wanting to make records. A lot of rejection before you get that one. But Kate went through because she totally believed in herself, and she was inspired to write these songs. And she finally did it. I think if you believe that you can do it, don't ever let anybody tell you can't do it. A quick one. When I was 14, I used to go outside the Beatles studio and looking through the wire glass to see if I could see any of them. And I couldn't see into the control room. In 1983, I had the keys to that studio. And 7 o'clock in the morning, I opened the studio to rebuild and remodel. So things do happen.
That's really inspirational.
Oh yeah, they really do happen. And I always remember that door, 7 in the morning, 7:30, and it was quiet in St Anne's Court, and opening the keys and went and remembered when I was 14-year-old looking through the window with my shielding my eyes to see if I could never see anybody.
Let me ask you, besides other people telling you can't do something, I find that our inner critic is the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also have to learn to listen to critics as well, because there's some things that you're going to do that's going to be really dumb. And then when you've got good friends that go, look, Bob, that's really stupid.
We love you, Bob,
but that's really stupid. And I go, oh, yeah, I don't know. when I get a dumb idea, but it's all learning, Fortunately, surround yourself with creative people and clever people. Don't surround yourself with idiots, because you'll become an idiot.
You're right, because we birds of a feather flock together.
Oh yeah,
we become what we hang out with. We become what we eat. We become what we do.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you about not hanging out with naysayers for sure. But definitely, if you have some good group of friends that have always been there for you, and vice versa, when they make a comment that they're like, "Hey, we love you, Bob, but maybe you might want to tweak this or something." It's definitely good information to take.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been building studios designing and building studios since 1983. After being in the industry a long time, and I'm very happy with the studios that I've created, and fortunately, if you do it right and you try and do it honestly and you try and give the person everything that they want, it's going to come back around on you, and people respect you. Money cannot buy respect, ever. It doesn't matter how much. I know plenty of people who have, in the music business, have made a fortune, and you know, whether they got respect or not, I don't know. Most of them do, who have made some success, but you've got to respect your ability, not the cash that you have in your pocket.
I totally agree with that, because I think sometimes people look at that as their only definition of success. So give us one lasting word, Bob, for our audience tonight. And first off, before I ask you to do that, I want to ask you to come back on the show here in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. So y'all heard him say that. So give us one lasting thought for the listening audience that you think is really important, that has changed your life.
The thing that changed my life doing the career that I'm doing now was the fact that listen to people who suggest something and say, I think you could do this. And I tried it and I loved it. And it was something that I never thought I would be doing. I always thought I'd be in a pop band and recording music and writing and playing. I never thought I'd be on the other side of it. And it happened, and it felt right. So, you know, listen to somebody who says, you know what, you'd make a great whatever. And you go, really? And you go, yeah. You know, and if you believe in that person, and you'll be surprised that you'll think, well, I wanted to be a footballer, but I turned out to be a really good therapist. You know,
I love that.
You know, you find stuff within you. If you've got to find that talent, and you've got to find that gift in you. And a lot of kids, sadly, can't see the gift that they have. Grab that gift. I weirdly had all this pointless knowledge about recording studios that I never thought I would ever use, until someone said, hey, you've been in enough studios, can you design one? I had the ability to draw, and I thought, all that pointless knowledge has now come very, very useful.
Very interesting. Bob, I really appreciate you coming into the studio tonight.
Hey, you're welcome.
That's amazing. I look forward to having you back on.
I'd love to be here again.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear more about your interesting life. It's very interesting, and thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we'll have Bob back on in the future. Obviously, he agreed to come back on. And I think one of the points that I really took from this interview was that it's all about inspiration. It's doing what you love. It's not allowing someone to say that you can't do it. And it's about finding that thing in your life that you do better than anyone else, because we all have that unique ability to do something that nobody else can do, and it's up to you to find it. Stay tuned. There's a great show for you next, and Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Berges. Be back this time, and well, I know. We'll be back this time in 3 shakes.